Wars fought not just with weapons, but with whatever keeps a soldier alive. And sometimes that's wool. While the trenches of World War I were marked by mud, cold and suffering, the German military relied heavily on something less talked about. Knitwear, hand-knit socks, scarves, balaclavas and even gloves were essential for survival in brutal frontline conditions. But who made these items? How were they issued? And what did they look like? In this video, we'll explore the world of World War I German knitwear, its production, patterns, military use, and the people often far from the battlefield who made it all possible. When we think of World War I, we often picture weapons and trenches, but behind the scenes, something as simple as knitwear played a vital role in the German war effort. In this video, we explore the historical significance of World War I German knit garments, what soldiers wore, how these items were made, and why they mattered. This is a look into the often overlooked fabric of wartime life. Of course, first I have to mention the harsh conditions on the front lines, especially how they were in the trenches. Just muddy, cold, and a real threat, so diseases like the trench foot came up, since the deployments were so long, especially by the German troops who kept their regiments in the front line until they were worn down. Speaking about their health and bad conditions is a video in itself, so I will just mention it now. While it was more dense on the Western front, in the wintertime it was far colder on the Eastern front, so it was important to keep the soldiers fit enough that they could keep on fighting and hold their lines. Yes, they had a great coat, only it was considered more for protection against rain. The models they wore in the beginning of the war, the model 1908 for the infantry or the model 1912 for the cavalry, did not have much lining to reduce the weight to carry for the soldiers. Instead, the use of several knitwear was considered by the army that should only be used in the winter and be given back afterwards, so it could be repaired and if too damaged replaced. But who made them and where did they come from? Now we have to make a difference, since not all of the gloves and mittens were knitted. These were issued by the army, while the rest of the knitwear had to be privately purchased by the soldiers. The issued ones were usually made by contractors and then given out by the Bekleidungsamt. There was also a possibility to purchase these as well, and even to order them via mail. Looking at these mail order catalogs, for example, we see all the possibilities of what was able to be purchased, not only by officers, but by the common man also, if they wanted to and or had the money. Some companies were specialized in supplying goods for the military, and other companies were not specialized to specific customers, but wanted to sell their goods to everyone. As war broke out, there were shortages of everything, so everyone capable had to be mobilized, even at the home front. In order to do that, the love gifts, or in German Liebesgaben, were introduced. I already talked about them in my video about the army shirts, but let's go again and a bit deeper, since I found some new sources. Basically, the love gift campaigns were orchestrated by cities, organizations like the Red Cross, private clubs, patriotic societies and companies on both local and empire-wide scales. The goods themselves were provided by corporations and private households. As we can see on this list from 1915 from the city of Cologne, about 3,000 warm body belts and all sorts of knitted goods, which are mentioned below, were sent to the front lines. Another red source shows this little piece. I'm not sure if it is advertisement or propaganda. Probably it is both. It shows how the love gift packages were sent to the front. First, we have seen a soldier or an actor playing a soldier being very enthusiastic about all the goods that were in the package, especially about the socks. Now, following up, we see a soldier or an actor playing a soldier, how he right as he got the socks is changing them, meaning putting off his boots, getting rid of his old socks and immediately putting on the new right out of the package. That is shown for both feet in full length. This would go on for the second one as well. I think we get the idea of it, and that showing one is enough. Now it is shown what this packages of this company includes, so let us have a look. The first thing we see is a card of the company, so everybody knew who this package sent. And I think this is part of the advertisement from the company, followed up by a sausage. Then we see something in paper wrapped. It is printed on the front, and inside we find a towel. Then we got another paper bag, and inside there are some cigars. So there's not only one, but actually two of them, so there's enough to smoke for the soldiers. Finally, here we are. Here is a pair of socks, just plain and simple, and it seems pretty grey. Then we got two candles, maybe some soap as it seems, a pipe for some more smoking, and dried meat. And there you have it. This is just an idea or an impression of what those love gift packages consisted of. Of course, there were a lot of different ones sent out there, meaning they varied a lot depending on which company or organization packed them together and sent them out afterwards. The army heavily relied on domestic and volunteer production to supplement military supplies. Motivation and mobilization for the volunteering working force came through appeals to patriotic duty as well as the wish to help the soldiers on the front lines as best as possible, so they could fight knowing the home front got their backs. The role of the women on the home front was essential for the men to survive in the harshest conditions. Knitting patterns were published in all sorts of magazines, periodicals and so on, related to crafting things, as we can see here on this wonderful page. Ideas were also distributed in industry journals like the Färberzeitschrift or magazine of the dye industry. Here it is recommended to produce the Leibinde out of knitwear instead of flannel, since the knitted wool offers the women less good hairage. Organizations like the Red Cross even gave out some standardized patterns. First, we are looking into the packaging list of Albrecht Knigge, who volunteered in 1916 as a hussar and went into war in early 1917. We can see what parts of knitted items he took with himself in January 1917. 6 woolen socks, 1 balaclava, 1 pair of pulse warmers, 2 pairs of gloves, but he does not mention what they were made of. Now, let's go in and have a look at the different types of knitwear we have. Some of the knitted gear was produced by WW1 Knits. I can highly recommend her work. Good quality, accurate, and she knows what she is doing. The link to her page is down below. Alright, let's have a look at the gloves and mittens. Of course, the infantry and cavalry had different types. For the infantry, just gloves were issued, while for the cavalry, the army gave out mittens. On the outside, a leather strap with a leather button, so they could be tied together and be hung on their bayonets when they were not worn. The gloves of the infantry had a lining and were just worn like this. The hands are okay to move in there, but you cannot shoot a gun or something else. They're just for warming your hands. That's it. The cavalry needed to move their fingers individually, so they were able to ride their horses properly. Until the middle of the war, the cavalry was allowed to strengthen their mittens with leather in order to spare their knitted mittens. So you still can do everything with your hands, moving your fingers, meaning shooting a gun, riding your horse, in contrast to the infantry ones. Since there were a lot of privately purchased gloves, especially mittens, and even more were sent out with the love gifts, the variety was wide of course. So we got some additional ones to look at. Another pair, which is not only knitted, but has been worked as well, so they are thicker. They could be worn on their own. These models could even be folded upwards and serve half as pulse warmers. Additionally, they could be worn above a thinner or normal thick pair of mittens. That sometimes was done when it got extremely cold, like in winter on the Eastern Front, as you can imagine. Anything that helped to protect body parts from freezing off was done. It is still able to move the hands and the fingers individually, so you could still ride or shoot the gun or do whatever you need to do with your hands while your hands are in 2 pairs of mittens. 1 pair is made of fur. These are in grey, but they could be made of black as well, or any color as long as they are sort of camouflaging. Still, the color brown was only allowed for officers. Since these are mittens too, you still can move your fingers individually and do whatever you need to do. Again, riding your horse, shooting a gun, building something, or whatever. Moving on to the middle of the body, and have at least a look at some patterns of warm body belts, since I do not own one so far. They could either be made of cloth or be knitted with straps for binding, or be made like a tubular scarf without any seams. We can see here on this page in this catalog. We go back to the forearms so we can have a look at pulse warmers. These could be made of any color, since they were worn beneath the clothes. They are basically knitted tubes, which are put around the forearms, so it could stay warm. Even the knitting patterns can vary very much with these, so there are no surprises. To the head we go. There were balaclavas, tubular scarves and ear warmers. I myself own just a balaclava and a tubular scarf. The balaclavas had no strict regulations and relied again on the love gifts sent from home. While the tubular scarf actually was regulated, it should be made out of field grey cloth with a length of 40 to 42 cm and 25 to 26 cm broad, but a tubular jersey fabric, without any seam. Going down further, we come to the most obvious, the socks. They were knitted and could have any color be made of, any pattern out there. The later the wool, the harder it was to get proper wool. That item might have been one of the most important parts of the knitwear for the soldiers in general, because it was used and needed all the time. Moving up a bit and we come to scarves. They could be anywhere in between grey, field grey up to black. The first issue pattern was provided as late as January in 1918, so all before that could have any width and length as soon as it was practicable. There were standardized items by the Red Cross, but anything else was more like just whatever, as long as it kept warm. Just to give you guys an idea, this is how it looks like when I'm wearing most of the knitwear. It does really keep you warm and cozy. I highly recommend it. Obviously, the knitwear had two functions. It was not only made for survival and keeping the soldiers fit to fight, but since most parts were directly made home by women and sent to the men, either personally or through love gift campaigns, they symbolized a connection to home too. It was often a small comfort in harsh conditions, and even more important so, because it was directly linked to home and the loved ones, which might have been even more of a motivation to fight or hold on. In understanding the full picture of World War I, the soft side and often overlooked parts of the equipment are playing an important role. Yes, guns and weapons are all quite important, but you need to be able to operate them in any condition or weather and temperature. If your hands are frozen and you cannot move them, there's no fighting or operating any gun at all, no matter the size. Or if your feet are frozen, you cannot walk or write anymore, that means you still were a casualty and cannot fight any longer. So even though it is barely seen and like in the mud of history, nevertheless it was really important to keep the soldiers and so the war going on. What are your thoughts on this topic? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching. See you next time. Have a good one. Bye.